The Montreal Canadiens are back in the playoffs, but how will they stack up against the Toronto Maple Leafs? What are their forwards going to look like? Defense, and who's going to start in net? We'll get into that and predictions and a whole lot more on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Julian McKenzie right back at it with another edition of Hockey Inside Out with the usual suspects. Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette, Jessica Rusnak from CBC Daybreak Montreal, and Rick Green, former assistant coach and former NHL player, of course, of your Montreal Canadiens. 1979. I've heard that year for over the last few days. That was the last time the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs played each other in a playoff series. Jessica and I were not alive. I believe Rick was in his third season with the Washington Capitals, hoping to get some wins in after, we all remember what the Washington Capitals were like back in the day. And Stu was in high school, I believe, right? Like grade 10 or something like that. That's what we were saying?
Grade 10.
It's been some years since the Canadiens and Leafs played each other in a playoff series, but in the present day, they're going to play each other. Let's talk about who could be starting in net for the Montreal Canadiens. For me, it's pretty obvious. It should be Carey Price. The guy we know has had a weird year, banged up with some injuries, but when he is healthy, he gives the team its best chance to win. But Jake Allen, he's done okay. He's done admirable work in the starts he's had in net. But I just, my view here, he's probably just going to be a 1B for the Canadiens in the playoffs. So what do you all think? Do you envision a scenario where Dominic Ducharme, the interim coach, says, you know what, Jake Allen, you've gotten us to this point, put him in the net? Or are they just waiting on Carey Price?
No, Carey Price will be in goal when the series starts, I'm certain. Jake Allen has proven that he, if they did put him in, that he could handle the assignment, I believe. But, Carey Price is the number one guy, the $10.5 million guy. And you look at the playoffs last season in the bubble, how well he played after being rested for an extended period. The concussion that he suffered has allowed him to rest. He missed the last 13 games. It certainly looks like he's healthy. He's been back practicing with his teammates in Brossard. So he'll be rested and ready to go. The thing, though, with this season, I think he'll have a short leash because if he struggles, and he was so inconsistent during the regular season, if he struggles again, I don't think Dominic Ducharme will hesitate to pull him out and put Jake Allen in. Would that upset Carey Price? Obviously, but Ducharme is coaching for his career too. He needs to. I think he needs to win a series to cement his position for next year. So I don't think he'll hesitate to go to Allen if needed, but I think Carey Price will be in goal when the series starts.
I think the big question is Carey Price healthy? I mean, he's had a lot of things coming his way, and I don't know if all of a sudden you can flip the switch and say, okay, he's in game condition. He's ready to, go up against the Leafs right off the bat. And, looking at Jake Allen's performance, he's been a consistent, good player for them with timely saves. And, as much as you can talk about Carey Price and the $10 million goalie, when it comes down to it, it's about, I think, easier said than done. You've got to go with the guy that you think can give you the best chance to win. And Allen, in his performance, I think is deserving. Carey Price, as much as maybe it's a little bit of an ego knock, but you have to go with the hot hand, and Jake Allen for me is deserving of it. And if he does not really do what he's capable of doing, which I would be surprised, then obviously you can make the switch. But if it goes on merit and what you've done for me lately, Jake Allen is the guy for me, and I don't know whether that's going to sit well with a lot of people, obviously.
Wow.
And salary definitely comes down to this. Carey Price is the highest paid player on this team, but if Carey Price wasn't making the money that he is, would Dominic Ducharme have an easier time saying, you know what, we're going to go with Jake Allen right now? Also, him being a rookie head coach, I don't really think that he's in the position to make a bold move like that and start the backup goaltender. I think Carey Price will be in goal for game one, but I don't think Dominic Ducharme will hesitate making a goaltender change if Carey Price comes out flat, and he'll have to say, you know what, we need to win games. It doesn't matter how much money you're making right now. I need to do something. And if Jake Allen's going to be the guy, it will be him. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a goalie change at some point if Carey Price is not able to get the job done.
Yeah, Jake Allen has been the more consistent goalie this year, but which goalie is more likely to stand on his head and steal a game or steal a series? It's going to be Carey Price. The other thing with Carey Price is just how well he handles the puck behind the net and makes life so much easier on his defenseman and helps him get out of the zone quicker. Carey Price, I can't envision them sitting him on the bench to start this series unless he's not 100% healthy, and it certainly looks like he is going to be 100% healthy heading into the series.
Okay, let me just ask something here quickly here. So I get the sense, Stu, I think most of us think that Carey Price should probably start that first game of the series. Rick's thinking a little differently here. And the fact that, he has that coaching experience, that really took me by surprise. Jess, I kind of want to clarify something with you here. I know you think you see Carey Price starting game one, but if you were the coach of the Montreal Canadiens and you didn't have to worry about the interim tag and you didn't have to worry about egos, if you had to make that decision to start the goaltender for game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, are you going with Jake or are you going with Carey?
I'm going with Jake Allen. If there's no politics aside and everything like that, I would go with Jake Allen. He's the guy who has been there filling in, and I would go with the hot hand, as Rick said.
Yeah. And, to slot Jake Allen in as a backup, to me, I don't know that title. Yes, I guess if you look at it as, Carey Price is your go-to guy. But listen, Jake Allen did the job in St. Louis. Let's not forget that this guy was really, really good for the St. Louis Blues that performed exceptionally well and did such a great job there that, there's no reason for me to not think that he's going to continue to do it with that experience and his overall ability to consistently play well. So, yes, it's really a tough call. There's a situation like Jess said, Dominic Ducharme, he's kind of caught in a tough place, but you got to put sometimes feelings aside and you have to go with your gut, and sometimes people's feelings get hurt from it.
If I'm Dominic Ducharme, I'm challenging Carey Price. I'm sitting down with him and I'm saying, Jake Allen got us here. Now I'm counting on you. Prove me right.
Wow. I'm a bit surprised here. I thought there would be a bit more, not necessarily loyalty, but I figured there'd be more calls for Carey Price, considering when he is healthy, he gives this team the best chance. But Rick is right. We don't know how healthy he really is. And if he's not that healthy, we may get the Carey Price that we saw for much of this season, as opposed to what we saw in the bubble last year. But I am quite impressed at a lot of you guys just saying, you know what, cut the politics here. Start Jake Allen for game one of the playoffs. I still think it's Carey Price. I still would pick Carey Price, but very impressed at the fact that you guys all wanted to see Jake Allen in net. But what about on defense here? What do you think the defensive pairings are going to look like? Hopefully this team is able to put Jeff Petrie and Joel Edmondson back together, because those two worked as well as they did. Shea Weber hopefully will be available for the Canadiens when they start to play the playoffs as well. How do you see the defense pairings starting to line up for the Canadiens when it comes time for the playoffs?
I think you have to go back to the old reliable that we've seen, previously in the year. Sherratt and Weber and Edmondson and Petrie and even Kulak and Romanov. These guys have to play together. They understand how and what they need to do to complement each other's style. And I think you've got to go with those guys. And, you can look at the top four guys going up against Marner and Matthews with a big challenge to try and find ways to, take their offensive power away. And they're quite capable of doing it. And that being said, I think it's going to be exciting to watch them perform against, two of the top snipers in the league, if you will. And I think they'll respond in a positive way. But I think the pairings also, it doesn't necessarily mean that as the game changes, situations change, you can shorten your bench and you can use some guys a little more than others. And I think that's what we'll probably see happening as we start into the big playoff run.
Yeah, I agree with Rick that those are the solid defensive pairings that you want to go with. Of course, we don't know if Shea Weber will be healthy enough to play game one. So let's just say that he is. Even Paul Byron talking about when he was able to get back into the lineup and how just rejuvenated he was and how badly he wanted to go back and play. And that could be a similar situation to Shea Weber. He's had some rest. They have a long period of time between their last game and the first game of the playoffs. So that will definitely help Shea Weber. And Kulak and Romanov, I believe that is a pairing that needs to be together. And that's the reason why you go off and you get guys like Merrill and Gustafsson, so that you have these depth players depending on how things go in the playoffs. And if things aren't working, well, then you can mix things up. But I think these have to be your 6 starting defensemen.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with the former NHL defenseman and the coach on this one. I think you got to go back to those 3 pairings. I've seen enough of Merrill and Gustafsson. I think Luke Richardson and Dominic Ducharme have seen enough of them also. I even wonder if maybe Xavier Ouellet has passed those 2 guys as the number 7 defenseman if they need somebody else to come in. I think Ouellet's more dependable, I think, as a guy playing with Romanov. Merrill and Gustafsson were picked up so they would have depth going into the playoffs. They played them. They played Merrill a lot. I think they wanted to see exactly what they had before the playoffs started. I think they've seen what they have now, and I'm pretty sure Merrill and Gustafsson will be watching from the press box when the playoffs start. And again, I wonder if maybe even Xavier Ouellet might be the first guy called in if they do need another defenseman.
And if all these guys are healthy, Weber, he can log some serious minutes. And like I said before, you can shorten your bench up. I remember in '89, we ended up getting down to 5D, and we had power play guys that would jump in there, and our penalty killing guys, and it worked. And whether it was 30 minutes a game, you found ways to play your best, and the guys liked it and knew what they had to do. And I think that this is something that the pairings, moving forward, are going to be well aware of what their obvious roles are, and it should be effective if it's used properly.
I think Weber's health is still a bit of a question mark. He hasn't really been shooting.
That's fair.
The team or skating with the team, but he hasn't really been shooting the puck with that upper body injury, which is always one of his, I believe, his left arm. But is he going to be 100% healthy when the playoffs start? And if he's not, do you want a Shea Weber in the lineup who's not 100% healthy? Because we saw him struggle this season, and I think a big reason for those struggles was the fact he wasn't 100% healthy.
And with that in mind, I think of matchups here. I think of Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, the damage that they've done together. Obviously, we'll get to forwards in a second and who should be lining up with them. But the defense obviously is going to be a huge part in this as well. Do you want a hurt Shea Weber and a Ben Sherratt, if they're happy to be paired together, going up against an Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner partnership? Like, do you go with Jeff Petrie and Joel Edmondson, going up against those 2 instead? Like, Rick, I'm going to lean on your coaching mind a little bit here, but how do you game plan them against the partnership of Marner and Matthews?
Well, you give the role of what you're expected to see against those 2 top players. And I mean, if it doesn't work, you just change it up. Petrie, Edmondson, those guys are quite capable of doing the job with their good size and their smarts back there. So I wouldn't be afraid, moving forward, to see how these guys handle this powerful duo with the Maple Leafs, because their D are, the Canadiens D are capable of doing it. They've done it in the past, and they have the liberty that they have 4 good guys that can match up against anybody in the league. So we'll see how it plays out. But health is a big part of how well everybody's going to perform, and we just hope that nobody is ever healthy or 100%, but you're just hoping that a lot of the guys are feeling better than what they were a couple of weeks ago. And they've got a big challenge, but I think that they can find a way to be effective.
Well, Weber and Sherratt are 2 big physical guys who aren't fun to play against. And we saw that in the playoff bubble last season against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. They were hitting everything. They were physical to play against. I think that's what you need against Matthews and Marner. You need guys who are going to hit them every time they're make it not fun to play in the Canadian zone. And I think Weber and Sherratt together are the best pair to do that.
Okay, well, we'll have to see how that goes on the back end. But what about at forward? That's another area where there will be a lot of questions and a lot of talking points there. We've seen people say, hey, has Cole Caufield played his way into the playoff lineup? What about Eric Stahl up at center? Where do you slot him in the lineup? Are we likely going to get the TDG line back with Tatar, Deneau, and Gallagher back together? So many questions. How do you all feel the Montreal Canadiens will line up at forward come playoff time?
Well, I would like to see Dominic Ducharme give some of the young players the opportunity that have shown that, they're playing good hockey right now. Like, look at Nick Suzuki and how he's really turned a corner. Cole Caufield as well, that he's showed that he could play, not just score goals in overtime, but 5-on-5 as well. And the chemistry that Suzuki and Caufield has been able to develop has been great so far. You look at Jake Evans just bringing his game to a whole new level, that I feel like these are some of the players that deserve to have a chance to see what they can go out there and do in the playoffs. If you compare it to last year in the bubble, yeah, it's a completely different sort of situation, but we saw how Kotkaniemi and Suzuki were able to raise their games there. Now, I don't know this year, because the way that Kotkaniemi has been playing, if he'd be able to do that again, but I would like Dominic Ducharme to maybe take a little bit of a risk and see some of these young players who've played well up until the end of the regular season and see what they can do in the playoffs.
It's going to be interesting to see how they set it up. Dominic Ducharme said after the last regular season game, he wouldn't confirm that Cole Caufield will be in the lineup in the playoffs. I find it hard to believe he won't be on a team that struggles to score goals. They need someone who can score. Suzuki and Caufield together looked good that last game against the Oilers. As Ducharme noted, though, it wasn't a playoff intensity game. It was a little easier than the meaningless game. But no, I'd like to see Suzuki and Caufield stay together with Josh Anderson on their wing. I think, a big body guy who go out and get the puck. I think it's pretty certain we're going to see Danault, Tatar, and Gallagher together. Kotkaniemi is sort of a wild card in this. I don't know if he's played himself into the press box to start the playoffs. I think the fact that he played well in the postseason last year might help his case. I was thinking maybe, Kotkaniemi between Toffoli and Armia as a possibility. And then you get down to the fourth line, and Evans, Byron, and Lehkonen have played well together. But then you got Stahl and Perry. Corey Perry's going to be in this, definitely going to be in this lineup.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling Eric Stahl will also, because Mark Bergevin went and got him for the playoffs. So I wonder, Evans and Lehkonen, I think those might be the two guys on the bubble if Ducharme decides he wants to get the two veterans in, which would make your fourth line with Perry, with Stahl and Byron. But it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I can't imagine them leaving Cole Caufield out of this lineup. 4 goals in 10 games, and watching him and Suzuki. Last season, when we were in Vancouver with the Canadiens, Mark Bergevin had a sort of informal scrum with a bunch of media guys, and we were asking, who can you see Cole Caufield playing with when he finally gets here? And he sort of said, well, it's interesting to see him and Suzuki together. So I think that's been in the back of Mark Bergevin's mind for a long time. And it'd be interesting to see. We talked about how the young guys stood up in the playoffs last season and played really well, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi. I would put the same challenge to Cole Caufield this year and put him in the lineup and see what he can do. The kid that doesn't disappoint, and I'd be surprised if he disappointed in the playoffs.
Yeah, you can't keep a kid like Caufield out of the lineup. I mean, just look what he's done and what he brings. I mean, every game you see this guy with opportunity to score and creative, slippery, and he's got to play within your top 6. And him and Suzuki have been great together. They seem to be really gelling, as a couple of guys that really are good players that are on a little bit of roll. So, I mean, he's got to be in your top 6, whether he's with Toffoli or, if Anderson goes in there, but he's got to be in there. And we're going to assume that Danault, I guess, is going to be back, and Tatar and Gallagher. And then you got to go with, Byron and Evans and Lehkonen. You got to like the way that they've performed as of late. So I'm a big believer in you got to go with the guys that are playing to date. Perry, of course, has got to be there. He's a crunch player that makes things happen. He's got to be in the lineup. Stahl, for me, I don't know. There's a question mark about his health. Mm-hmm. He's had kind of a hard time. So they have to make the changes with who's performing the best. And right now, I guess it's trying to read who is 100% or close to 100%, and then they'll decide on which combinations from that point.
Yeah, that injury that Ducharme mentioned, Stahl didn't play in the last game, and he said he was dealing with an injury, so that'll factor in. But this is a nice problem for the Canadiens to have. In previous seasons, depth has always been an issue on this team. So we're talking here about who's going to be in on defense, who's going to be in on forward, and who's going to be in goalie. So I mean, there's depth top to bottom. And that's a nice problem to have going into the playoffs, because as we know how physical the playoffs are, guys are going to get hurt, guys are going to come in and out of the lineup. And if guys aren't performing, there's that internal competition also, which is a really good thing to have.
Yeah, and we all know that Kotkaniemi has struggled and, hasn't obviously been playing his very best. But listen, playoffs last year, the kid stepped it up and everybody was going, oh, wow, who's this guy? And we're hoping that we're going to see the return of Kotkaniemi come playoff time. And, he can be an effective asset for the Canadiens no matter where he's used. And I'm looking forward to seeing the character rise up in this kid and show what he's capable of doing. And I have a kind of a gut feeling that he will.
You got to remember, too, this is a team that just played 25 games in 44 days. I mean, this is a banged up, worn down, beaten up hockey team. After last regular season game there, Ben Shrott came out for the interview about 10 minutes after the game ended. He was already in his street clothes and showered and ready to go. Like, thank God this is over. Let me get home, kick my feet up, and relax for a few days. So I think we're going to see a rested Canadiens team. Hopefully for them, a healthy Canadiens team going into the playoffs. And this is a team I imagine will have a little bit more jump than it did when it went winless in its last 5 regular season games.
The Montreal Canadiens entering a playoff series against the Leafs, you're going to look at some guys who may be considered X factors. Carey Price, if he starts, automatically. Possibly even the biggest X factor of them all, depending on how healthy he will be. So aside from the goaltending position, where do you see these X factors? What kind of a buzz name is that anyway? X factors. Where do you see these X factors coming from on the Montreal Canadiens? Are you looking at a guy like Philip Deneau? Are you looking at someone on defense? Who else are you expecting to have a big series in order to make a difference for the Montreal Canadiens?
I'm looking at Tyler Toffoli and possibly Cole Caufield, although I don't want to put all that pressure on a kid who's only played 10 NHL games. But if you look back to the last time the Canadiens went to the conference final, which seems meant like a million years ago right now, with Yaroslav Halak in goal, Mike Camilleri was the guy. I mean, how many key goals did he score in that series? I can still picture him down on one knee, with that one-timer shot that he had. The Canadiens need somebody to do that. Carey Price, you mentioned earlier, he played so well in the bubble last season. The reason they lost to the Flyers is they just couldn't score. I think they got shut out in 2 of those games. So they need somebody to step up like Mike Camilleri did and score goals in key moments. I think Tyler Toffoli is the guy most likely to do that from what he's shown during the regular season. He scored many key goals at big times. He has the shot. And Cole Caufield, they're talking about an X factor. I think Cole Caufield could be an X factor there. Here's a guy who scored every level he's played at. The bigger the spotlight on him, the better he seems to play. So they need somebody like that to step up and put the puck in the net. They have guys who can work hard, guys who can check. Philip Deneau is obviously going to be up against Austin Matthews. That'll be a key matchup. But they got to score goals, and somebody has to lead the way doing that.
Nick Suzuki, 14 points, 11 games, been the most consistent guy on the hockey club, been playing great. I expect him to continue to develop and contribute in a really positive way. I would obviously have to jump in there with Tyler Toffoli, who's consistently been good, finding ways to score, and he's going to continue to do that. And I'll throw another name in there, and Jake Allen, a guy that, if given the opportunity, he's going to, I believe, do a great job and allow the team, like he's done before, a chance to win each and every night.
Julian, the X Factor was a reality show that was produced by Simon Cowell. So
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Big shout out.
My X Factor is Brendan Gallagher. That guy, I remember him in the playoffs last year against the Flyers. He was, able to really be the spark plug of this team. He was not happy with his performance one game, came back and really led the way and was able to have a huge contribution on this team. So I think he's going to be the guy, especially after being out with an injury. He's going to come back and he's going to be a man on a mission. And I think a lot of players are going to jump on the bandwagon with Brendan Gallagher and be able to bring that kind of energy. Another guy, Josh Anderson. I'm excited to see what he's able to bring. Of course, a kid who grew up in the Toronto area. He always enjoys being part of this Montreal-Toronto rivalry right now. So I think those 2 guys are 2 people that I'll be looking at to be the difference maker in this series.
Yeah, Gallagher's a good pick, Jess, because, I think if there was ever any doubt that he's the heart and soul of this team, I think we know now for sure with the way the team struggled after he went out. And back with his line mates again. We said, Tatar's not the same player without Deno and Gallagher. So that line could be an X factor also. Just they're going to be relied on heavily. They'll be matched up against Matthews through the series, and they'll be counted on to produce offensively also.
Yeah, I will stick on that line, and I will say that Philip Danault also deserves some consideration as an X factor or someone who could make a difference here, not necessarily from an offensive standpoint in terms of scoring goals, but that would be nice, you'd think. But I think if he does a shutdown job of keeping Austin Matthews at bay, which is very difficult, I understand what that is, that could play a huge role in how this series goes. Because we all know, yes, they have the depth that they have in their top six, but Austin Matthews has been able to score so many goals this year, and we know how dynamic he can be playing alongside Mitch Marner and having him feed him the puck. If you find a way to kind of stifle that tandem, and I think Phil Danault is going to be at the center of any stifling here, that could be a huge turning point for the Montreal Canadiens in this series. So I think Philip Danault, that's a guy who we were talking about his contract earlier this year and what money he could stand to make. He could make some money if he does himself a great job in this series against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I agree with you, Julian. The centerman is critical in the defensive zone play. And, the pairings have to understand that, hey, we're not looking when you're up against those two guys with that type of firepower, you're just looking at shutting them down. Don't be, careless in your decisions to go and help out offensively when you've got to find way for your team to win by not allowing that tandem to do damage against you. And I think if they have that good mindset, hey, listen, I'm not worried so much about creating stuff offensively. If it's there, I'll jump on it. But when they're on the ice and we're playing up against them, they're not going to get a sniff of an opportunity to try and score. And if they do that, they're going to have some success against Toronto.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to slight John Tavares and William Nylander, other members of that top six as well. We know how lethal the Toronto Maple Leafs can be, but it's very clear that Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, the spotlight will be thrust on them. Maybe more so on Austin than Mitch, but those two players will be ones to watch. So we've looked at forwards, we looked at defense, we've looked at goaltending, we've looked at potential difference makers. Let's get to some predictions here. Montreal Canadiens, Toronto, who do you think will win that series and how many games? Any other predictions you want to throw in as well? Now is the time to be the ultimate prognosticator. Put your hats on and kind of, think of how the series will go. I don't know who'd like to start, but where do you think the series is going to end up? Predictions, people. We're in the business of doing that.
Well, everybody says, okay, regular season's over. Now the new season starts, the real season. But, Toronto 7-2-1 against Montreal. They've got their work cut out for them. I don't know whether or not they're going to be able to find a way to keep the Toronto offensive elite in check. They have found a way all year to damage every team that they play against, and they've done it really well. But I would like to lean a little bit towards, unfortunately, to Toronto in 6 games, and as the Marner and McDavid
Matthews.
They come in the same category, so I get brain cramps. But Matthews, if they are able to keep them contained, they're doing a big part in giving them a chance to win.
I'm the opposite of Rick. I think the Habs are going to pull this off. They're going to beat Toronto in 6. I don't know what it is. It's just a feeling I have. And I just kind of think back to last year when they were in the bubble, the last place team to get in, and no one thought that they were going to do any damage against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they were able to pull off the upset there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to do this again. And I think there's a lot more pressure on Toronto going into this playoffs. They haven't had much success when they got into the playoffs. They had a good regular season. All the eyes are on them to see what they can do. And Montreal's kind of like, I'm happy to be here. We kept Calgary off our tail for long enough, and we're in the playoffs. So just because of that, I just have a feeling that Montreal will win this in 6.
I disagree with you there, Jess. I'm tempted to say the Leafs will sweep. But I think it's rare for a sweep in the playoffs, so I'm going to say Leafs in 5 games. I just think they're just a much, 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 much better team than the Canadiens. The only question mark they have is in goal, but they got a couple of goalies now, sort of like the Canadiens. They can use one guy or the other guy. We're talking about who might be a difference maker for the Canadiens. We know who's going to be a difference maker for the Leafs. It's Matthews and Marner. They're elite players in the NHL, and the Canadiens don't have any of those guys. So I think it's a mismatch. I think the Leafs will win in 5 games. They're just so much of a better team. Their GM went out and built a team with the goal of winning the Stanley Cup, bringing in the veterans that he brought in. And I can't see the Canadiens winning the series.
I think Toronto really is tired of being called jokers in the playoffs. They've added a few pieces to their lineup that's going to help them weather this grinding playoff setup. And I think that they're going to respond in such a way that they don't want to hear about Toronto choking again. And so they're very much motivated. I think they have the personnel to back it up.
And I wonder how much not having fans in the stands, will hurt this, the hostile environment of coming to the Bell Center. The Canadiens won't have that. But, in Toronto, it's not exactly the same thing. But still, you're playing in front of the home crowd, and not having that as a factor will be a difference. And I think also just watching it, I'm sure a lot of people would have been, even if you didn't have tickets to the game, drive into Toronto, watch it in a bar, and vice versa here. So as Ben Sherratt said, that it is really disappointing that after all these years, we finally have a matchup and no fans can be there.
The Leafs also went out and got guys like Thornton and Simmons and Spezza, these veterans who grew up as Leaf fans and want to play for the Leafs. And if the Leafs were to win a Stanley Cup, these guys would be there'll be statues in Toronto built for these guys. A city that hasn't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. I just think, the Leafs were built to win the Stanley Cup, and the Canadiens were built to get into the playoffs. And I just think, as I said, I can't see the Canadiens winning the series.
Man. So Rick and Stu say Leafs. Jess says Canadiens. I think the Leafs win in 7, mostly because I think the Leafs are going to be a better team. I still think the Canadiens, if they go back to the play that they were demonstrating in the first half of the season, they give themselves chances at stealing a game or 2, possibly even 3. But I also think the Leafs are able to play against that style as well. I will say this, though. If the Montreal Canadiens win game 1 of that series, all bets are off. If the Leafs win game 1, game 2, okay. If the Montreal Canadiens win game 1, even that, if they win game 1 or if they win game 2 and game 3, completely different series. All bets are off. I think the psyche could start to creep in with the Leafs where it's like, oh no, here we go again. We're going into another tough series. All the pressure falls in on us. We have to see how it goes. But I will say Toronto Maple Leafs in 7. So who is going to win this series? Let us know in the comments section below. Are Rick, Stu, and myself right? Is Jess right? Who's going to look like an idiot after this video is posted? Who knows? Let us know in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to win the series between Toronto and Montreal? If you have any other questions you'd like to see any of us tackle in a future episode, let us know in the comments section as well. And visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out our full episode.